Hello everyone and welcome to Kids Plus. I'm Stephen Driver, the Children and Youth Minister at Paul Christian Fellowship, and I'm glad that you've clicked on this video as we're going to unpack a great passage in the Bible that's going to teach us how we should be responding to Jesus. Now, if you were here last week, I just want to see if you can remember the key things that happened. We were looking at the rich young ruler, and you were introduced to this lovely man. Yes, he's a very handsome man. Don't look too longingly into his eyes or you might fall in love. Anyway, he learnt, didn't he? And hopefully you learnt that it is harder for a rich man to go to heaven than for a camel to go through an eye of a needle. Meaning that the attitude of being dependent on money can sometimes mean that we can struggle to be dependent on Jesus. And this week we're carrying on with that same kind of attitude theme. We're going to be looking at power and mercy, and we're going to be discovering how we should be responding to Jesus. So let's start with a little activity where I'm going to ask you who you would rather be. Don't worry, there isn't a wrong answer, it's just a bit of fun. So the first one is Tony Stark. Would you rather be Tony Stark? Tony Stark, if you didn't know, is the name of the man who pilots the Iron Man armour. So it's essentially Iron Man. You're £1 billion, you're a billionaire, and you can do whatever you want. You can build an Iron Man suit. You can have private jets. You have power and authority more than you can ever imagine. You can be Iron Man. Or would you rather be someone like the Queen or the King of England? Someone who, yes, is very rich, in fact, probably close to as rich as Tony Stark, maybe less rich, but you have power over a whole nation. You can hire and fire prime ministers, and you talk to people on a global stage regularly. You have so much power and authority. There's no one more powerful than you in the whole of Great Britain. Or would you rather be a blind man? A man who can't see. You have a job, you have a family, but you're restricted in everything that you can do by being blind. Now, who would you rather be? I'll tell you who I would rather be. I'd probably be Iron Man, just because I'm not that interested in politics and being in charge of a country. I think I'd make really bad decisions. But the ability to have lots of money and fly around in an Iron Man suit really appeals to me. Because we gravitate to power, don't we? If we know someone who is powerful, we want to get to know them because maybe they'll be able to help us out. Or maybe there's something we can even learn from them. And as we know, Jesus is the most powerful. And at this point in the Bible, most people agree that Jesus is the Son of God and he is the most powerful person there is. And we can all understand that. But we're going to look at two different responses to how powerful Jesus is. First with the disciples, and secondly with a blind man named Bartimaeus. So let's learn that story together now. So this story is taken from Mark chapter 10, and it's just after that rich young ruler that we learnt about last week. You see, at this point in the story, everyone knew that Jesus was king. So we'll give him a little crown there. The people who definitely knew this were the disciples. Now, James and John, who are these two lovely people here, thought that that meant that Jesus had come to rule Jerusalem and that they might be given important jobs because of that. So they asked Jesus quite confidently that they be given the two most important jobs underneath him, that they would rule on the left and right hand side of Jesus. This actually upset Jesus because he realized that they didn't understand why he had come. They knew who he was, like a lot of us do. But they didn't understand why he had come. It also shows us the way they thought about other people, that Jesus was powerful, a powerful king, and they wanted to lord it over people like everybody else. What they wanted was power. So Jesus told them that they didn't fully understand why he had come, that if they truly wanted to rule others, that they needed to be willing to serve them. That Jesus said himself that the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve others. They needed to stop being bossy. Straight away after that encounter, we see Jesus come across a blind man called Bartimaeus. Bartimaeus heard that Jesus was coming, and he also knew that Jesus was the Messiah, the King, who was coming to rescue his people. But unlike the disciples here, Bartimaeus did not ask for power or wealth or fame from Jesus. He simply asked that Jesus be kind to him, that he would have mercy on him. All he wanted was to see and follow Jesus. And Jesus gave him exactly that. Bartimaeus was able to see again, and Bartimaeus dropped his cloak and everything that he owned, and he followed Jesus. Because that's all Bartimaeus wanted. He didn't want wealth, he didn't want fame, he didn't think that he was better than anybody else. He just wanted to follow Jesus. You see, the big difference between the disciples and Bartimaeus was that the disciples wanted power. All Bartimaeus wanted was mercy. Let's unpack that now. So that was a very interesting story. Let's just summarize that a little bit now. So, what did two of the disciples ask Jesus for? Well, they asked him to be on the left and right hand side of him, basically the most powerful people in the world. What did Jesus say they would do instead? Well, Jesus told them that they should be servants, that they should serve, that they shouldn't be powerful. That was the wrong way of looking at things. And how is Jesus an example to them? He is an example because he is the Son of Man who came to serve, not to be served. And also that he gave his life as a ransom that we know he's going to do when he dies on the cross. What an interesting passage that is. And there's two words I think really sum up what we have just looked at. The first word is power. And when I say power, I mean authority, ability to rule over other people, that kind of power. And mercy, seeking forgiveness from someone who is powerful over you, where something is wrong that needs to be righted. That's what mercy is. We see power coming out with the disciples when they asked Jesus for what they wanted, which was a bit cheeky, by the way, because they knew who Jesus was. Jesus asked the question, well, what is it that I can do for you? And they wanted power. They wanted to rule. See, they understood who Jesus was, but they thought that meant that they would rule like him. Bartimaeus, however, when he was asked by Jesus, what can I do for you? He just wanted mercy. He wanted kindness. He wanted to be able to see so he could follow Jesus. The disciples thought that following Jesus was all about lording it over people, being better than other people, ruling the new world with Jesus. It's all about power. It's all about how good they are, and nothing to do with serving. Jesus doesn't have time for the disciples' view at all. Not at all. And he says to them that they need to serve. They need to be underneath everybody else. Now, you might know that my title, because I said it at the start, is the Children and Youth Minister. Now, minister is a word that is used in lots of different churches. My boss is called a minister, but also the Prime Minister, and there's ministers in Parliament, like people who run the country, are called ministers. And that's a really important word, because the word minister actually means to be a servant. So I'm the children and youth servant for the church. Jez, who's the boss at our church, is called minister, which means he is the main servant of the church. The ministers who work in government are there to serve the country. The Prime Minister is the person who's in charge of serving the country the most. That's because the UK is built on Christian values, where we determine that the more powerful you are, the most you should be serving. It's a wonderful way of looking at things. The more authority you have, the more you should be helping other people. Jesus came to serve, not to be served. And that's a really amazing thing that we can know about Jesus, because if that is true about Jesus, that he didn't come to be served but to serve, that means he isn't a king that we should be scared of or think that's going to be horrible to us, like a dictator that's just going to rule that we can't have a relationship with. Instead, a king that serves us means that he wants to care for us, that he is kind to us even though we don't deserve it. We receive mercy. We should always be thinking ourselves like Bartimaeus. See, Bartimaeus actually didn't have anything going for him. Being blind back then was basically saying that you're useless, that you're worthless. He would have been on the street. But when Jesus came, he knew that Jesus was his only chance. He pleaded for mercy. Please be kind. Please help me. I know who you are, and I just want to follow you. Heal me, please, God. Please, Jesus. And that's what Jesus did. Jesus is all about mercy. And he's trying to tell us, if we're followers of him, to be merciful to each other, to serve one another. Here's a question for you. If you were at the kids group right now and I asked you to do something that might not be so fun, like stack the chairs or tidy up and clean, would you do it? And would you happily do it? When your parents ask you to do something at home just to help them out, do you say no because they're the parents and they should be doing it? Or do you go, yes, I'll do that because I want to serve. I want to show mercy. I want to be like Jesus. Jesus calls us to be kind. But more than that, that whole ransom for many line is so important to understand. That ransom for many line means that he is telling them that in the future he is not only going to serve people by doing kind things, he is going to serve them by dying for the greatest problem of all, sin. Sin where we say, shove off God, I'm in charge, not you. Where we separate our relationship with God and it's completely broken. That puts us in the same position as Bartimaeus, needing the biggest problem fixed. For Bartimaeus, his physical problem was his eyes, but like us, his biggest problem is his sin. And later on, Jesus is going to die on a cross, taking the sin of the world on him and making it so we can have a restored relationship with both him and the Father and be able to live in eternity with him. That is a servant king willing to die for us, and we can rise with him. That is the message of the gospel. That is the message that we should be getting to know every single day, and that is that's a way of life that as Christians we should be trying to live out every single day. It can be really, really hard. In a second, after this video stops, I've asked your parents to print out one of the covering pages, which is that verse that the Son of Man came to serve, not to be served, and gave his life as a ransom for many, just in bubble writing. And what I want you to do is I want you to colour that in as much as you want, have fun with that, but then stick that on your door. So every day when you walk out of your bedroom, you can look at that and remind yourself that you need to be like Jesus, the Son of Man, and serve everyone around you. Not because you're worth less than them, but actually you are just like them. But because you know Jesus you should be serving them like he served us. It's a really hard thing to do, because lots of times we don't want to do those horrible things. But it's a really good thing to be. It's a really good thing to know. Think about what Josh said in the youth service a few weeks ago. He said, wouldn't it be amazing that if you turned up to a kids group and everyone was kind to each other, everyone loved each other, everybody served each other. When there was a horrible job going on, there were more hands up than hands down, because everybody wanted to serve. That was a community that someone would be drawn to, that someone would want to be in. Not because they would be able to push people around, but because they knew that community was a community full of love. But it's a hard place to be. If you ask yourself, really, if you were going to do that, will you do that horrible job? Would you really put your hand up? It's time to pray that God will give you the wisdom, but also the love and the servant heart, like his son, to be able to do those things. Let's pray together. Father God, thank you that your son died as a servant for all. I pray that we can be just like him. Amen.